"Name?" the clerk asked. The old man hesitated. His hands trembled as he adjusted the sleeves of a jacket 2 sizes too large, faded, patched, and still bearing the faint emblem of a Marine division nearly no one remembered. "Henry Talbot," he said softly. Then, almost as if reciting a prayer, "Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." The courtroom didn't stir. Just another homeless man in trouble for sitting somewhere too long. A dozen people in the gallery scrolled on their phones. A young prosecutor flipped pages with an air of impatience. Only the judge froze, completely. Judge Evelyn Harper had seen thousands of names cross her bench, but this one turned her blood cold. Because 20 years earlier, a man named Henry Talbot had run into enemy fire to save her brother. And then, he vanished. Today, he'd returned not as a hero, but in handcuffs. "Thank you for being here." Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. The courtroom lights flickered, too bright for comfort, too cold to feel human. Henry Talbot sat quietly, hands folded over a paper cup of water that trembled ever so slightly in his grasp. His frame was thin beneath the weight of a jacket that had seen 3 wars and countless winters. His boots, ducked, taped at the soles, didn't touch the floor squarely, and yet there was something in the way he sat, still, straight, watchful, that betrayed who he had once been. The bailiff called out, "Case 42A. City of Crestview versus Henry Talbot." He rose slowly, every joint complaining. The judge nodded toward the young assistant district attorney, who adjusted his crisp tie and stood confidently. His name was Nathaniel Boyd, a fast, tracked Ivy League graduate with a spotless record and a penchant for quick judgments. "Your Honor," Boyd began, "this defendant has been cited 3 times this month alone. Loitering, trespassing, disturbing the peace." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Henry without making direct eye contact. Mr. Talbot was found behind the Midtown Bistro after hours, refusing to leave. Despite previous warnings, he continues to violate city ordinances. What he didn't say was that Henry had been sitting behind the restaurant by the kitchen vents, trying to stay warm on nights when the temperature dropped below 20 degrees. That he never panhandled, that he never begged, that the line cook, Jimmy Bell, had left him half a sandwich and a quiet nod, knowing his father had served with someone named Talbot years ago. But Boyd had a checklist, and humanity wasn't on it. "Your Honor, given the repeated infractions, we recommend 30 days of community service and a no trespass order for the downtown business district." From the bench, Judge Evelyn Harper furrowed her brow. She'd barely glanced at the file when she heard the name earlier, but something about it wouldn't leave her alone. Henry Talbot. It whispered through her memory, like a wind returning to a place it had once been welcome. She looked down at the file again. Her finger froze on a sentence: C, recipient of Silver Star, 2nd Battalion, Fallujah 2004. Her heart dropped. Without realizing it, her hand moved to her necklace, a tiny gold locket that never left her neck. Inside was a photograph of her brother, Linty Jonathan Harper, in his dress blues. She remembered the funeral, the letters, the stories told by Marines she'd never met. One name had come up again and again: Sergeant Talbot. But that was 20 years ago, and that man couldn't possibly be this man. "Mr. Talbot," she asked carefully, "do you have legal counsel today?" Henry cleared his throat. "No, Mom. My public defender got pulled to another courtroom." "Would you like to make a statement?" He nodded, eyes lowered. "No excuses, Your Honor. Just trying to stay warm. That's all." "Why that location?" He hesitated. "Jimmy, the cook, he sometimes leaves food. I knew his dad. We served together. He doesn't say much, but he's kind." "And your military service?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "U.S. Marine Corps, ma'am, 1976 to 2006. Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Iraq was my last tour." The courtroom grew still. Even Boyd seemed thrown off. That's when the door opened. In stepped a tall, sharply dressed man in a tailored navy suit, dark leather briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the room like he'd walked into a storm and knew exactly how to hold his footing. "Your Honor, my apologies," he said, walking to the defense table. "Matthew Klein, representing Mr. Talbot. I was just retained." Henry blinked in confusion. He hadn't called anyone. Certainly couldn't afford anyone like this. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Klein," Judge Harper said, eyebrows raised. "It's a recent development, Your Honor. I request a brief recess to speak with my client." She studied him, then Henry, and saw no trace of dishonesty, only something deeper. 15-minute recess, she said quietly, and rose from the bench, disappearing into her chambers. Henry turned slowly to the man beside him. "I didn't hire you," he said, his voice a rasp. "You didn't need to," Klein replied. "The firm of Klein, Becker and Harper is handling your case pro bono." Henry flinched. "Harper?" he asked, the name catching. "Yes, exactly like the judge." Behind her desk, Judge Evelyn Harper closed the door behind her and sank into the chair, as though her body suddenly remembered its weight. Her hands trembled as she opened a locked drawer and pulled out a photograph she hadn't touched in years. It was her and her brother, Jonathan. He was in uniform. She was 19, clutching his arm proudly. Next to it, she unfolded an old letter. The paper was soft, nearly translucent from so many readings. "If it weren't for Sergeant Talbot, I wouldn't be writing this. He pulled me out, literally. Ran through hell to get me behind a wall. Told me no Marine gets left behind, not while he's breathing." The letter had arrived 2 weeks before Jonathan was killed by an IED. Evelyn had spent years trying to track down the man her brother said saved him. Military records turned cold. Post-deployment confusion, PTSD, and a medical discharge had buried Henry Talbot's trail. Eventually, it seemed he had disappeared. Until now, she didn't wipe the tears. She didn't need to. No one was watching. Back in the courtroom, Henry stared at the floor. He had nothing. No home, no income. His medals were lost in a storage unit auctioned off years ago when he couldn't pay the rent. He lived off coffee shop vents, donations, and silence. And now he sat in a courtroom filled with strangers. Except not all of them were strangers. In the back row, a man with silver hair wearing a Marine League jacket leaned forward, eyes narrowed. He hadn't heard Talbot's name in years. But the way the man had moved, stood, even while in pain, it was unmistakable. When Judge Harper returned to the bench, something had shifted. Her robe was still in place. Her voice was still calm, but her hands no longer trembled. "Mr. Klein, how would your client like to proceed?" "We request dismissal of all charges, Your Honor." Mr. Talbot was not trespassing. He had informal permission from restaurant employees and was merely trying to survive sub-zero temperatures. The prosecutor stood to object, but the judge raised her hand. "I have some questions for the defendant first." She looked directly at Henry. "Sergeant Talbot, were you present outside Fallujah in April of 2004 during a convoy escort?" Henry blinked. The courtroom blurred for a moment as memories surged. Fire, chaos, screaming radios, blood. "Yes, ma'am." "And did you assist a wounded officer?" Lieutenant Jonathan Harper. His body froze, his jaw locked. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Yes, he was hit trying to pull a wounded corpsman. I dragged him back under fire, told him to stop talking and stay alive." He paused, eyes far away. "He made it to medevac. They said he made it to Germany. Then I heard he was gone a few weeks later." The silver-haired man in the gallery stood up suddenly. "That's him," he said, his voice breaking. "That's Staff Sergeant Talbot. He saved us all that day." The gallery fell into stunned silence. Judge Harper didn't blink. "This court is in recess," she announced. 10 minutes. "Bailiff, Mr. Talbot is to remain." Then she stood, eyes locked on Henry's for the briefest second before she turned and walked out. The 10-minute recess felt like a lifetime. Inside her chambers, Judge Evelyn Harper paced. Not the controlled, purposeful walk of a legal professional, but the nervous, fragile steps of a woman trying to hold herself together. She stared at her reflection in the glass-paneled cabinet, robes flowing, chin high, eyes rimmed with memory. Then she reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over a contact she hadn't dialed in over 8 years, Colonel James Matthews, S. Retpa, USMC. She hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Matthews." Jamies, it's Evelyn Harper. A beat. Evelyn, haven't heard your voice in a long time. I need a favor. Urgently. And it's about someone you might remember. She gave him the name. Silence followed. Then, he's alive. Yes, he's here. In my courtroom. The colonel's voice lowered. Give me an hour. 57 minutes later, the door at the rear of courtroom 2B opened with an audible click. 3 Marines entered in full dress uniform. Colonel James Matthews, eyes sharp, shoulders square. The Master Sergeant Alina Corbin, battle-hardened, silent. And a young corporal with a highly polished mahogany case clutched tightly to his chest. Whispers surged through the gallery. The silver-haired Marine stood again, instantly at attention. Several others followed, old habits returning like muscle memory. The bailiff, startled by the sudden formality, stepped back. Judge Harper entered behind them and returned to the bench. Henry Talbot stood too, not out of compulsion, not out of habit, but because instinct demanded it. Seeing the uniforms triggered something long dormant inside him. He braced himself, legs unsteady, posture firm. The judge adjusted her glasses, then slowly took them off. For the first time in my years on the bench, she began, I'm speaking not solely as a judge, but as a sister, a citizen, and a woman who has carried questions for 2 decades. She looked directly at Henry. My brother, Lieutenant Jonathan Harper, wrote home once about a man who saved him in Iraq. A man who ran through enemy fire. Who stayed with him while bullets ricocheted like hail. Who wouldn't leave him, wouldn't abandon anyone. That man was you. Henry's throat worked, but no sound emerged. He called you the reason he was able to send that letter at all, and when he died, you were the last person who gave him safety. She looked toward Colonel Matthews and nodded. The colonel stepped forward. Staff Sergeant Henry Talbot, he said, voice echoing. We've been trying to locate you for several years. Your file was flagged in the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative due to previously classified information now made available. He turned to the corporal, who stepped forward, opened the case, and revealed a single medal gleaming beneath the courtroom lights, the Navy Cross. Gasps spread like fire. In recognition of conspicuous gallantry and heroism in combat, the colonel announced, reading from the citation, You are hereby awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest military honor. Intelligence declassified this year confirmed that your actions disrupted a full ambush on coalition forces. Your bravery prevented further loss of life. Henry blinked. He tried to speak. Failed. Tried again. There must be some mistake, he whispered. I was just doing my job. No mistake. Colonel Matthews replied, eyes shining. This is overdue. Too long overdue. From the back, the silver-haired Marine called out, attention on deck. It started like a ripple. The courtroom stood. Veterans, lawyers, even the prosecutor. One by one, people rose, not out of ceremony, but out of something deeper, something sacred. They saluted him. A man who had been invisible that morning, arrested for trespassing, standing now, shaking, exhausted, still hungry, but no longer forgotten. Judge Harper wiped a tear as she regained her voice. In light of these revelations, she said steadily, all charges against Sergeant Talbot are dismissed, with prejudice. She struck the gavel once, her hand trembling only slightly. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, the Master Sergeant approached Henry with a government-issued tablet. Sir, she said gently, your VA benefits have been reinstated and corrected. Your disability rating has been upgraded to 100%, service-connected, retroactive to 2007. What does that mean? He asked. It means, she smiled, you have substantial back pay coming. Full medical coverage, housing allowance, and education benefits, should you want them. Henry blinked like she was speaking another language. Attorney Klein stepped in. Our firm will ensure it's all processed immediately, he promised. No more delays, no more red tape. From the gallery, Jimmy Bell, the cafe cook, stepped forward, face wet with tears. My dad always said a man named Talbot saved his life in Desert Storm. I never thought I'd meet him. And I never thought it'd be you. He reached out and shook Henry's hand like it was made of glass. The young prosecutor, Nate Boyd, swallowed hard and crossed the room. Sir, I didn't know. He said, eyes lowered. Please accept my apology. Henry looked at them all, not sure whether to stand taller or disappear again. Then, softly, he said, "I'm not a hero. I just didn't want anyone left behind." 2 weeks later, the keys felt foreign in his hand. Henry Talbot stood in the hallway of a modest brick apartment complex on Harrison Avenue, gripping a key fob like it might dissolve. The new place was clean, warm, quiet, a one-bedroom unit arranged through the Veterans Housing Stability Program. The walls smelled like fresh paint. The carpet didn't creak. There was even a small potted plant on the kitchen counter. He walked in slowly. His boots sank into carpet so soft it startled him. On the wall, someone had already mounted a wooden shadow box. Inside were his medals, his Purple Hearts, his original Silver Star, and centered in velvet, the newly awarded Navy Cross. He hadn't touched them since Klein's team recovered them from a storage unit auction. One Henry hadn't even known was still on record. Across the room, a knock came at the door. He turned uneasy. It was Judge Evelyn Harper, this time out of robes, her dark coat dusted with December snow. She carried a simple cardboard box. "May I come in, Sergeant Talbot?" He nodded. "Please. And it's just Henry now." She smiled. "Then I'm just Evelyn." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them heavier than anything in the room. "I brought something," she said, placing the box on the coffee table. She opened it to reveal a bundle of old letters, each one tied with string. The edges were worn, the paper thin from years of reading. "They're from my brother," she said softly. "He wrote our family every week while deployed. After we lost him, I kept these. I thought maybe," she paused, "maybe one day you'd want to see what he said about you." Henry's fingers were unsteady as he picked up one letter. The writing was neat, angular, unmistakably military. He unfolded it slowly. "Mom and Dad," it began, "don't worry about what you're seeing on the news. I'm safe, because of a man named Staff Sergeant Henry Talbot. Yesterday he did something I still can't believe. When our convoy was ambushed, he ran into enemy fire to pull me back. I was bleeding, dizzy, couldn't think. He wouldn't leave me, even when I ordered him to." Henry blinked hard. "He told me, 'No Marine gets left behind while I'm breathing.'" His voice cracked as he read it aloud. "I'd forgotten he wrote that." "You didn't forget," Evelyn said gently. "You lived it, even when no one else was watching." They sat in silence. The room felt fuller, somehow. Not with things, but with something more important, memory. After a long pause, Evelyn looked around the apartment. "It's still sparse," she said, "but it's yours. And you're not alone in it." Henry nodded. "Feels strange. Having walls again. A thermostat. A door that locks." She smiled. "You know, after Jack died," she continued, "I went to law school. Started this Veterans Court initiative. Built it around a promise. Jack's words. He said the measure of a Marine wasn't what they did when people were watching, but what they did when no one saw." She looked at him. "That was you." Henry said nothing. Just sat still and quiet. Then slowly, he said, "I always wondered if saving him, if it mattered. I used to think maybe I did more harm than good. That getting him out just delayed the inevitable." Evelyn reached out and touched his hand, firm but warm. "He didn't die because of you. He lived the way he did because of you." Later that night, after Evelyn had gone, Henry sat by the window with a cup of tea in his hands. Outside, the snow fell in slow spirals. A silence settled in, not lonely this time, but whole. He looked again at the Navy Cross. All his life, he'd believed his legacy had ended in that sandstorm in Fallujah. That after the bullets stopped, nothing that followed really mattered. That a man could save lives and still vanish, forgotten in alleys behind diners. But today someone had remembered his name. The apartment grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that used to haunt Henry Talbot. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, the silence didn't mean abandonment. It meant peace. He sat with a letter in his lap, his reading glasses balanced on his nose. The heater hummed softly. His boots were clean and tucked neatly by the door. For the first time in years, there was no lingering sense of needing to move, to leave before someone asked him to. A home. Not a cot. Not a corner. A home. He heard voices outside, kids laughing, a dog barking, someone scraping ice off a windshield. Life was continuing. And for the first time in decades, He felt like he had re-entered its current. The knock at the door was gentle. Henry opened it to find Jimmy Bell, the line cook, holding 2 paper bags. "Leftovers," Jimmy said sheepishly. "And some fresh bread from my mom. She remembers your name now, too." Henry smiled and let him in. They ate quietly at the small table. It wasn't about the food. It was the company. Midway through dinner, Jimmy reached into his coat pocket. "My dad, he left this in his footlocker. Always said it was from a friend who saved his squad in Desert Storm." He slid a faded photo across the table. An old black and white snapshot of a much younger Henry Talbot, standing in a line of Marines in a desert that hadn't seen rain in centuries. "You kept us all going, sir," Jimmy said quietly. Henry nodded slowly, the weight of the photo in his hands somehow heavier than the Navy Cross. Later that week, the Veterans Court held a ceremony. Not the kind with cameras and reporters. This was quiet, humble, held in a community center gymnasium, folded flags hung on the wall, a podium, a few chairs, coffee in paper cups. But every seat was filled. Evelyn Harper stood at the front. She spoke about her brother, about promises, about how the law isn't only about punishment, but about protection, about recognition. She introduced Henry Talbot, who stood stiffly, hands behind his back like he was on duty again. "I spent a long time thinking no one remembered me," he said, his voice calm. "That everything I gave had just disappeared." He paused, looking around at the faces. Veterans, family members, lawyers, cooks, kids. But someone remembered. And that made everything matter again. A silence followed, a heavy, holy silence. Then the room stood, without a command this time. Evelyn visited often after that, sometimes with files, sometimes with nothing but conversation. One day, she brought a framed photo of her brother. Henry placed it beside his medals. He read every one of Jonathan's letters. Some made him laugh, some made him cry. All of them helped him remember. He started volunteering at the shelter he once relied on, built bunk beds, rewired faulty lights, planted a small winter garden. "Can't fix the whole world," he told Jimmy once, "but I can fix a busted socket." In April, Henry received a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It wasn't just about benefits. It informed him that a small stretch of road near the old training base in North Carolina had been renamed Talbot Way. No parade, no speeches, just a sign by the trees. It was enough. There are people who carry the weight of heroism in silence. They don't stand on podiums. They don't seek medals. They simply do what's right when no one's watching, and sometimes the world forgets them. But that doesn't mean their sacrifice disappears. Henry Talbot was forgotten not because he failed his country, but because systems often fail the very people who protect them. This story reminds us that honor isn't measured in headlines, but in the quiet moments, when someone remembers your name, when dignity is restored, when justice reaches backward and sets things right. So here's the lesson. It's not enough to thank a veteran once a year. It's not enough to applaud courage when the cameras are on. We must build a world where no one is left behind. Not in war, not in peace. Because the greatest measure of a nation is how it treats those who gave it everything and asked for nothing in return. If this story touched you, don't let it end here. Comment, respect, below to show the world you believe in kindness, dignity, and never forgetting those who served. And if you want more stories that honor the quiet heroes among us, subscribe to Talus Strength and tap the bell. Because sometimes the smallest remembrance is all it takes to make someone stand tall again.